You know this story. Two children walk into a forest. They leave a trail of breadcrumbs so they can find their way home. The birds eat the breadcrumbs. They get lost. They find a house made of candy. A witch lives there. She wants to eat them. The boy gets pushed into the oven. The girl escapes. They find their way home. The end. It is a story about resourcefulness. About children who outsmart the monster. About the forest as a place you can survive if you're clever enough. That's one way to tell it. Here is another way. In the version the Brothers Grimm collected in 1812, the children do not walk into the forest because they are lost. They are taken there, deliberately, and left. The person who plans the abandonment is not a stepmother. It is their mother, their biological mother. The woman who gave birth to them looks at her own children and makes a decision. They will be taken into the deepest part of the forest, left without any way to find home, and she will return alone. This is the second time in this series we have found the same thing buried in the original text. Snow White. And now this. In each case, the villain of the story, the one who wants the children gone, is not a stranger, not a stepmother, not a figure safely distant from the family. It is the mother. And in each case, later editions of the story changed that detail. Made her a stepmother. Made the horror comfortable again. Tonight we read the version before the comfort was added. Welcome back to The Real Grimm. Before we get into what actually happens in the story, I want to give you something that changes how every detail lands. Hansel and Gretel is one of the most recognizable stories in the world. Most people can sketch its outline from memory. Two children in a forest, a gingerbread house, a witch, an oven. It feels ancient in a way that very few stories do, primal, almost archetypal. But there is a historical context for this story that most people have never heard, and it is not a metaphor. It is documented fact. Between 1315 and 1322, Northern Europe experienced what historians now call the Great Famine. It was the worst sustained food crisis in medieval European history. Crop failures, caused by a prolonged period of cold and wet weather, spread across the continent. What followed was not just hunger. It was the systematic breakdown of the social structures that kept communities alive. Scholars who have studied this period have documented cases of child abandonment on a scale that was previously unimaginable in European history. When families had nothing to eat, children, particularly younger children, who could not work, were sometimes taken into forests and left. Not out of cruelty, in the simple sense. Out of the cold logic of survival. Fewer mouths meant the remaining family members might live through the winter. There are also records, from this same period, of infanticide, and at least one documented case of cannibalism in a German village. I tell you this not to shock you. I tell you this because the Hansel and Gretel story, in its earliest form, is not a fantastical warning about strangers and forests. It is a story about something that actually happened to families. The forest was real. The abandonment was real. The hunger was real. The witch's house made of food, bread, cake, sugar, is the dream of starving children. The most frightening thing in the world to a hungry child in 1315 was not a monster. It was the possibility that their own parents might leave them behind. The Brothers Grimm published their first edition of the story in 1812. At that point, the story had been in oral circulation for at least 400 years. In that first edition, the mother who plans the abandonment is biological. The Grimms changed her to a stepmother in their 1840 edition, 28 years after first publication. They had already done the same with Snow White in 1819, and the pattern in Cinderella had been shifting across oral versions for centuries. The 1812 text is the one we read tonight. The story begins in a house at the edge of a great forest. A woodcutter lives there with his wife and their two children, a boy named Hansel and a girl named Gretel. They are poor in the specific way that medieval poverty worked. Not destitute in ordinary times, but with no margin, no reserve. When famine came to the land and the woodcutter could no longer sell enough wood to buy enough bread, the family ran out of options very quickly. One night, lying awake in the dark, the woodcutter says to his wife that he doesn't know what they are going to do, how they will feed the children when there is nothing left even for themselves. His wife answers him without hesitation. She tells him what they will do. In the morning, they will take the children into the deepest part of the forest, light a fire for them, give them each a small piece of bread, and then leave. Walk away and not come back. The children will not be able to find their way home. They will be rid of them. The woodcutter refuses. He says he cannot leave his own children to the forest and the animals in it. His wife says that if he won't, then all 4 of them will starve together, and she begins to work on him, calmly, persistently, until sometime in the small hours he gives in. In the next room, Hansel and Gretel are awake. They are hungry, which is why they cannot sleep. And through the thin wall of the cottage they hear every word of the conversation. Gretel cries quietly into her pillow. Hansel lies still and thinks. When he is sure his parents are asleep, he slips out of bed, pulls on his shoes, and goes outside into the moonlight. The path in front of the cottage is gravel, and in the full moon the small white stones shine like scattered coins. He fills both pockets until they are heavy, then goes back inside and lies down next to his sister. He tells her not to be afraid. Then he waits for morning. Before daylight, the mother wakes them both. She gives each child a small piece of bread, their share for the day, she tells them, and the family sets out into the forest to cut wood. As they walk deeper along the path, Hansel keeps falling behind, stopping to look back toward the house. His father notices and asks him what he keeps looking at, and Hansel says he is watching his little white cat sitting on the roof to say goodbye. His mother tells him without turning around that there is no cat. It is just the morning sun on the chimney. She's right. But what Hansel has been doing each time he stops is reach into his pocket and drop a white pebble onto the path. They walk for a long time. When the forest is thick enough that the house has long since disappeared, the father builds a fire. The mother tells the children to rest there and wait. She and the father are going further in to cut wood and will come back for them when they are done. She gives them the rest of the bread. Then the 2 adults walk away into the trees. The children sit by the fire and wait. At midday, they hear what they think is their father's axe, but it is only a dead branch knocking against a tree in the wind. They eat their bread. The afternoon passes. Evening comes. The fire burns lower. No one returns. Gretel begins to cry, and Hansel tells her to wait until the moon rises. When it does, the white pebbles on the path behind them catch the light and shine, one after another, all the way back through the dark. They follow them through the night and reach the cottage just as dawn is breaking. Their mother opens the door, and her first words are not relief. She tells them sharply that they slept so long in the forest she had thought they were never coming back. Their father says nothing, but the text notes that he is glad. He had felt wretched leaving them there. Not long after, famine returned. The same conversation happened again in the dark, the same bedroom, the same voices, the same argument, the same outcome. This time Hansel tried to do what he had done before. He waited until his parents were asleep and went to the door to collect pebbles from the path. The door was locked. She had locked it. She had done this before, and she knew what he would do, and she had locked the door. He went back to his sister and told her not to cry. He would think of something. In the morning, each child was given an even smaller piece of bread than before, and as they walked into the forest, Hansel crumbled his piece slowly in his coat pocket and dropped crumbs along the path every few steps. He had no pebbles. He used what he had. They were taken deeper this time, much deeper, further into the forest than they had ever been. The father built a fire. The same words were said. The adults walked away. The children waited through the same long afternoon, the same evening, the same darkening of the fire. They waited for the moon. They looked for the trail. The birds had eaten every crumb. They walked for 3 days. They found berries along the way and ate them, but the berries were not enough, and by the 3rd day they were weak and barely moving. The forest gave them nothing, no path, no clearing, no familiar shape of land. On the morning of the 3rd day, a white bird appeared in the branches above them, singing in a way that made them stop. When it flew, they followed it without deciding to, and it led them through the trees to a small clearing, and in the clearing there was a house. The house was built of bread. The roof was cake. The windows were clear spun sugar. This needs a moment to land properly. These are children who have been walking for 3 days with almost nothing to eat, who were given almost nothing before they left, who were hungry before any of this began. The house of food is not a fairy tale flourish. It is the answer to something so desperate it could not be spoken aloud. Hansel reached up and broke off a piece of the roof. Gretel pushed out one of the sugar window panes. They ate standing up, right there, without speaking. A voice came from inside the house, soft, almost sing-song, asking who was nibbling at it. The children answered that it was only the wind, and kept eating. The door opened. An old woman came out leaning on a stick, and her manner was entirely warm. She took them each by the hand and brought them inside and fed them properly, milk and pancakes with sugar, apples and nuts, and made up 2 small beds with clean white sheets. They lay down and slept as if they had not slept in weeks, because they had not. What they did not know, and could not have known, was that the house was a trap. The old woman had built it specifically to draw in hungry children. She had bright red eyes that could barely see, but a sense of smell as acute as any animal's, and she had smelled them coming through the forest long before they saw the house. When they woke the next morning, her manner had changed entirely. Hansel was put in a cage. His purpose now was to eat. She fed him the best food she had, every day, so that when he was fat enough she could cook him. Gretel became a servant. She carried water, lit fires, cooked the meals that went into the cage. She cried, and the old woman told her that crying was useless. Every morning the witch came to the cage and told Hansel to hold out his finger so she could feel how fat he was getting. Hansel held out a small bone he had found in the cage instead. Her eyes were too weak to tell the difference, and every morning she felt the thin bone and grumbled that he was not fattening fast enough. For weeks passed this way. Eventually she lost patience. Fat or not, she told Gretel to fetch water and heat the oven. She would cook Hansel in the morning regardless. Gretel did as she was told and wept through the night, because there was nothing else she could do. In the morning the witch told Gretel to climb into the oven and check whether it was hot enough to bake bread. What she intended to do the moment Gretel was inside did not need to be said. Gretel understood it perfectly. She told the witch she didn't know how to get in. Could the witch show her how? The old woman, impatient, leaned into the oven herself to demonstrate. Gretel pushed her in and shut the iron door. The witch screamed once, and then was silent. Gretel opened the cage and let Hansel out. After some hours they reached a wide stretch of water, a lake or a broad river, with no bridge and no boat in sight. A white duck was swimming near the bank, and Hansel asked it whether it would carry them across. The duck came to the bank and let them cross, one at a time, because together they would have been too heavy. On the other side the forest began to look familiar, then more familiar, and then, through the trees ahead, they saw their father's house. They ran. Their father was inside, and when he opened the door and saw them he held them without speaking. The text says simply that he had not had a single happy hour since he left them in the forest. Not one. Their mother was not there. She had died. The text says nothing more than that. No explanation, no cause, no drama. She is gone. The children open their coats and aprons, and the pearls and precious stones scatter across the floor of the poor woodcutter's cottage, rolling into every corner. All their troubles are over. The story ends there. I want to talk about what this story is actually doing, because I think it is more layered than it appears. The obvious reading is economic. A family without enough food abandons its children. The children survive through cleverness and luck. They return with wealth. The problem is solved. It reads almost like a folk economic fantasy, the mechanism by which the poor might escape poverty without any larger system changing. But there is something underneath that reading that is more disturbing and more honest. The central act of this story is a parent choosing her own survival over her children's lives. Not a stranger, not a stepmother in the 1812 text, a mother. And the story does not condemn her with any force. It does not give her a villain's speech or a monster's face. It gives her a voice in the dark. We are going to starve. There is no other way. This is what we have to do. The 1812 story is unusual in that it allows that voice to be almost rational, almost reasonable. The horror is not that a monster appears and threatens children. The horror is that the conditions of life could bring a person to that decision, and that the decision could be made in a whisper, in the dark, in a bed where a husband lies next to you and eventually agrees. The Great Famine context is not incidental here. The scholars who have identified the historical parallels argue that the Hansel and Gretel story, in its early oral form, was not primarily a warning about witches and forests. It was a story about the worst thing a community had actually experienced: the dissolution of the family bond under conditions of extreme scarcity. The witch is terrifying, but the witch does not arrive until chapter 4. The terror of this story begins in the first scene, in a bedroom, in a conversation between two adults who have already decided. There is also something worth examining in the resolution. The children return with jewels. Their father is overjoyed. Their troubles are over. The mother is dead. The story doesn't make a scene of it, doesn't dwell, doesn't explain. She is simply gone when they get back. This is the Grimm approach to consequence. Not dramatic punishment, not elaborate justice, not even a clear causal chain. Just, she is no longer there. The world has corrected itself, quietly, while the children were away. Compare this to Snow White, where the queen is forced to dance in burning iron shoes at the wedding. Or Cinderella, where the stepsisters are blinded at the church door. Those punishments are public, specific, and proportional to the crime. Here, the punishment, if it is that, is invisible. We never see it happen. We only see the absence where the person used to be. There is something in that quiet disappearance that is, I think, more unsettling than the more theatrical endings. It is the consequence that announces itself without any drama. She is gone. That is all the story thinks needs to be said. The Hansel and Gretel story that most people know today is largely the 1812 Grimm version, with one significant alteration that happened in 1840 and another layer of softening that happened through stage productions and illustrated children's books in the late 19th century. The 1840 change is the one we've already discussed. Biological mother becomes stepmother. The Grimms made this change themselves. It is the same change they made to Snow White in 1819. The same impulse, to make the story less disturbing in one very specific way, drove both revisions. A stepmother who resents her husband's children is a culturally pre-loaded villain. She can be cruel without that cruelty implicating anything fundamental about parenthood. A biological mother who plans her children's deaths is a different kind of horror entirely. The Grimms understood this. They made the story easier to tell. The illustrated editions of the late 1800s softened other elements. The witch's house became more elaborate and whimsical, less the desperate food dream of starving children, more a confectioner's fantasy. The witch herself became increasingly theatrical, a more obviously evil figure with less of the patient predator quality of the original text. By the time the story was adapted for early children's theater, the Engelbert Humperdinck opera Hansel and Gretel premiered in 1893 and became enormously popular. The Abandonment had been further domesticated. In the opera, the mother sends the children into the forest in a moment of frustration, not as a deliberate plan. She regrets it immediately. The father is warm and loving. The horror of the original decision, the cold, whispered conversation in the dark, has been replaced with a domestic mishap. Disney never made a direct Hansel and Gretel adaptation, though the story has influenced dozens of films and television productions. The consistent pattern across almost every version is the same. The abandonment is softened, the parents are made more sympathetic or more clearly redeemed, and the central horror, that the children's own mother made a deliberate plan, is either changed or minimized. What is interesting is that even in the most sanitized versions, the witch and the oven remain. The house of food remains. The essential structure, abandoned children, predatory adult, oven as instrument of final justice, survives almost every retelling. What does not survive, in most versions, is the opening scene. The bedroom, the conversation, the mother's voice making the case in the dark. That scene is the one that makes the story true. Everything that follows, the forest, the house, the witch, the oven, is consequence. The story's actual subject is what was decided before any of it. Who made the decision to send children into the dark? And why? The witch is a monster. We know how to feel about monsters. What the 1812 story asks you to sit with is something harder. The person who sent the children toward the monster in the first place. The person who knew what a forest at night meant for a child who could not find their way home. That person is the reason the story has lasted. These stories survived 1,000 years because people kept passing them on. If you want to help keep the real versions alive, like and subscribe. The next one is already coming.